welcome the political leader of the NTA, Gary Griffith, joins us on the Zoom line, our first conversation for 2024. So in that regard, let me wish Mr. Griffith and his family Happy New Year and, of course, continued, well, I would say success and keep the struggle alive in this 2024. All the best, Mr. Griffith.
Thank you very much. Same to you and yours.
So we're looking at this development, and before we go into the analysis of that, well, many, including myself, will call it a breach, because I guess anyone who puts their leg over a fence and gets into a venue, well, in Trinidad terms, we call that storming. We'll come to that in a few, but let's just go through your particular memory and your involvement. I know it was a very intimate one because of your role back then as that security attaché, coordinating all the security and logistics for Mr. Panday during his particular tenure. I know you would have worked very close with him in the mid-90s towards, well, towards your particular time. How much years it would have been? You worked alongside Mr. Panday in that time?
I worked alongside the Honorable Prime Minister Basdeo Panday in his last 2 or 3 years as Prime Minister. Mm-hmm. So I was his military attaché, so I was responsible for all of the security, the logistics, the administration, meetings, the protocol. I was the master of ceremonies at the events, dealing with budget allocation, and all of the personnel who would be involved in working for a Prime Minister, from all of the security, the special branch, the defense force, which would be something over 100 persons. So I was closely aligned with Basdeo Panday for about 3 years, his last 3 years as Prime Minister.
And then upon your resignation from the military, he then appointed you opposition senator.
Yeah, temporary opposition senator. He then appointed me into the UNC executive. So I blame Basdeo Panday for getting me into politics. Really and truly, it was because of Basdeo Panday. And then in about 2005, I was requested to be the candidate for the UNC in St. Joseph. With the departure coming of Jerry Yetme, who was the Member of Parliament at the time, for the 2007 general election. But then the Congress of the People set in, and with the bullet of the Congress of the People, everything just went haywire. But I still was very close with Mr. Panday. He was able to, I have worked closely with several persons who that held very strong leadership roles in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think it's important for everyone, whether it is persons that maybe your teachers, your coaches, you try to build on the character of those persons and try to utilize it to develop yourself. So I did that. I looked at Basdeo Panday. I looked at the character traits of things that he would have done as a politician, his charisma, his being able to be easily approached by persons, trying to understand, trying to unify a country. So I looked at a lot from Basdeo Panday. I also was the military. I was the aide-de-camp to President Robinson. I did the same with President Robinson. I extracted the best I could get out of him. Same with Kamala Prasad Bissessar, temporary as well, for a few months with the Honorable Patrick Manning. So what I did, even with Keith Rowley, when I could actually see when I was the Commissioner of Police, working with that Prime Minister, I was able to understand what not to do. So it is always good that when you work with people, you can take the good and the bad, and you'll be able to help develop yourself. And this is what I've tried to do.
Were you all still close towards his latter years, Mr. Panday?
No. After about 2010, with the change in the leadership of the UNC, I will just have interactions with him at specific moments, such as cricket and so forth. When we will see each other, the last time I saw him would have been at Hyatt Line. He just kept going. There were times that even with myself as a military captain, trying to keep up with Basdeo Panday was very difficult. And this was a man after a triple bypass, and he'll keep going. He'll be at events till 2 in the morning and 7 in the morning. I have to be right there at the door to greet him, meet him, and accompany him. So he was somebody, he was a dynamic figure. It was really unfortunate what happened yesterday. Yesterday, it totally overshadowed something of significance. The country actually saying their final goodbye to a great man. It was rather unfortunate. As it pertains to funerals, many people just automatically believe that a previous Prime Minister is expected to have a state funeral. That is not so. The concept of a state funeral, there are 4 types of funerals really, if I can recall. A state funeral is one that is designed specifically for a sitting president or a prime minister. However, a government can decide based on the significance and the achievements of the individual to make a special cabinet note to have that person have a state funeral. It happened in 1971 with Sir Larry Constantine, and we saw it with the Honorable Patrick Manning, His Excellency Max Richards, and Basdeo Panday. Then other than that, so you can have a previous prime minister or president, and then the government can decide that because those persons are already entitled to an official funeral. And rightfully so, decisions will be made just similar to what the People's Partnership did with the President A.N.R. Robinson. When I was then the coordinator for that event, that was a 5-day state funeral. And then the official funeral is usually for previous Chief Justice, ministers, and so forth. And then you have government, state-funded funerals, such as what we had, I think, with Desmond Draper, previous permanent secretaries, Mrs. Robinson. And then you have a military funeral, that's the fourth one, and that one they actually have colors and so forth. So there's a lot of work that goes into the concept of these funerals, from a state funeral, an official funeral, a state-sponsored funeral, and a military funeral. And this one was a state funeral, as I said. It is usually just for a president or prime minister. Thankfully, this government saw it fit to have this as a state funeral, as they did with Patrick Manning and Maxwell Richards, and as we did the People's Partnership with A.N.R. Robinson.
Let me ask you, Gary, let's unpack it, because clearly the Southern Academy for Performing Arts can only hold so much. I think 700 plus is the capacity. So not everyone, granted everyone wants to be there, not everyone could get in. So it's a invitation-only scenario. How does it work in that regard? I would imagine it's based on the family's discretion, and outside of that particular request from the family, I would imagine certain officials will be given first preference. Just walk me through how the invitation list will go.
When the state, as soon as a state funeral is announced, someone is designated to be the coordinator, the person in charge. Usually it is the Minister of National Security. The previous Prime Minister, somehow she decided to throw it on me to give me extra work on that. I was the coordinator for President Robinson's funeral. And with that, you have to form a committee. You have to do a cabinet note. President Robinson's funeral would have been about $6 million. Because people, it's a lot of work that Mr. Amory Brown, I know exactly what he went through. He's probably still recovering. You have to look at the coordination from the military, logistics, traffic, and protocol, timing, discipline, making sure even the layout of the national flag, making sure it's not the wrong way. And in this situation, when it comes to invitations, but that's what the big talk about is now, it is between the state and the family that decides who will be invited. The state will be involved primarily in those type of dignitaries, persons who will be ambassadors, previous persons who may be in positions of authority that you feel that it is important for them to be invited. And then after, they're also involved in the actual layout, the order of service, as to who will speak, who would arrive. So my personal view is that I did see a concern, like even when I was in that service for President Robinson, I did try to not politicize it. So I ensured that the Chief Secretary of London's Sackley spoke, the leader of the opposition at that time, Keith Rowley, that he would have spoken. And if it is a decision is made that no politician will speak, at least have the common courtesy to have the recognition of the leader of the opposition. That was not done in any part of the program. It had the arrival of the Chief Justice, the Prime Minister, and so forth, and not the leader of the opposition. So that was one aspect. The other aspect is the family will then, they also have a part to play in the selection of those people that they would invite. So sometimes it's about 50-50. The state really and truly has full control. The state can override. The state, but you have to be understanding, sympathetic to understand the needs and the concerns of the family. As it pertains to the invitation list, a previous Senate president, you would expect that he would be invited. If he was not invited, well, then something went wrong, because it's not to say that the place was totally packed. There were actually seats available.
Well, the thing is, Mr. Hamilton said that he would have contacted the president's office. The president's office told him to get on to the Prime Minister's office, and then the Prime Minister's office would have delegated the responsibility to someone else. I think it was Foreign Affairs. So he would have gone through the steps, and he said that he would have followed all the instructions. He sent an email with no response. So I guess in that regard, I guess he felt a bit snubbed yesterday.
And maybe so, but I mean, to go to all of those lengths to try to get an invitation. I mean, I'm really shocked. It's like myself, of all the people, I mean, I've listened to so many people claim that I was so close to Basdeo Panday. Apart from the immediate family, all of the people put together did not have as much time interacting with Basdeo Panday as I did. I was there almost 24/7. And I was not invited. And if I was not invited, I'm not going to jump over a railing. I'm definitely not going to be calling from pillar to post begging for an invitation. In our military training, you comply and then complain. You can, after the fact, you don't go and try to muddy up the waters during the period of this to complain and to, no, you don't. If it is that I was not invited, I wasn't invited, so be it. And the people who made that decision, well, that is for them to sleep with. I hope they sleep good at night. We attended the wake. We signed the condolence books myself and other executive members of the National Transformation Alliance. But to be jumping over a railing, I mean, what that does, it sets on, there's a reason why you have railings. There's a reason why there's security. Everything in our country, it has to do with a one-word order.
But she said she was allowed, you know, Ms. Nunes Teixeira, again, just for the discussion's sake. She said she pulled up there clearly. That's the parking here by the highway clearly. They couldn't get into the normal entrance because, again, there would have been some restrictions with the traffic yesterday. So here it is. Well, she angled up herself, watched the distance between road and drain and railing and storm. She said the police allowed her. That's her words, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, if a few decades ago, I will try to get her number and help me get into the Army Fet or say Fets with the Saints or Hyatt line in the next few weeks. She seems to be a very good stormer, but I'm not. That would have been the days with purple haze and sin and radiation when it is. I would have been a teenager storming. You want to be a leader of a country. You want to serve a country, and what you're doing is basically breaching order. There's order. That's the reason why the railings were put there. And to hear her state that law enforcement officials were telling her how to not adhere to order by jumping over a railing, it is very unfortunate. It sets a bad example to anyone believing like, okay, well, coming up to Panorama, that's what I could do because these people were presidents of the Senate and very senior ministers in government, and if they could do it, I could do it too. I wish to advise all persons, it is the wrong thing to do. It is totally inappropriate because you believe that you have a right for something. It does not give you the authority to breach regulations. It is very embarrassing. And unfortunately, as I said, it threw a blanket of over the school yesterday where the memes were flying left, right, and center. And the importance and the significance of the funeral played second fiddle to the stormers.
So, in essence, I guess going forward, I guess it's a lesson for all. And I know that obviously some of the, at least in the past, I would have seen Queen's Park Savannah and different areas being used as the facility for some of these state funerals, some of these massive events. But still, even with the Queen's Park Savannah, there is a capacity limit, basically. So I would imagine it's invitation only, and if invitation is not forthcoming, I guess you just stay home and look at it on television like everyone else.
Exactly, and I also, even though mistakes may have been made, it does not give justification to do what we saw yesterday. The jumping over a railing and not adhering to order, and then stating that the law enforcement officials said, well, if it is you want to get in, that is what you could do. That was totally unfortunate. The ball would have been dropped heavily there. Having said that, I think it was also very unfortunate that the state will not see it fit to have invited the president of the previous Senate president. But as I said, it is their right. If it is that you were not invited, you were not invited. You can't be rushing and begging and calling everybody, hoping that you could get in. I mean, if you want to lead, as I said, you're a senior persons in political parties. You have to set an example, and that I think was rather inappropriate. Well, I was not invited. I sat back and watched it on television.
Well, I guess, you know, within the context of politics, and again, it's, I guess, making a statement or making a particular act to send a message, because again, as you said, the former president of the Senate there was not invited, and he went. He would have mentioned that he sent the invitation. Ms. Karen Nunes Teixeira said that she tried to reach out to Amory Brown. I guess he would have given her a snub, and she said, how could a former colleague be so vindictive? She tried to reach out to Mr. Alwari, and he said he couldn't do anything. So, you know, she, I guess, carrying some feelings as to how she would have been dealt with, knowing, she said, she was a former colleague of these personalities just mentioned. So I guess in her mind at that point in time, it was more to show up the current administration, but in a way, it seems it was a backlash, and it's almost like egg in face, because again, what we're seeing there, it's one that really put a kind of shadow on the most solemn of occasions yesterday. And as I said earlier in my monologue, two things I really don't go to if I'm not invited, which, well, firstly, wedding. If I'm not invited, Gary, I'm not going. And, well, of course, a funeral, if it's a state funeral.
Yeah, remember there's a movie, Wedding Crashers, and then they had Funeral Crashers, so that's why something coming up in the near future starring both of them. And as I said, it is not to try to say that because I was a previous minister, it means I have a right to attend a state funeral. That is totally incorrect. If you go back to the number of persons who have been previous ministers that are still alive, you could get probably about 200. And then the funeral itself can only be in Sapa could hold just probably about 500 or 250 family, 250 for the state. And the state has to deal with trying to invite all of the different ambassadors, high commissioners. And so when you have to pack all of that, sometimes it is persons will be left out, and you can feel offended, you can be upset about it, you can discuss it after the fact in a debate or whatever, but you can't come on the actual day of the event. And sometimes what happens with Trini politicians, probably it is, in hindsight, they saw it as an opportunity to ramage and to show that their rights were being infringed, so they're going to fight for their rights, and in the hope that the public will look up at it and smile. I am sure that both of them, after what they've seen by the public's response, in hindsight, I think they would now wish that they could just press rewind and not do what they did, because there was nothing to have gained in any aspect politically that would have benefited Hope. The Hope now to Noop after what they did. And it is, but people make mistakes, so it's not for us to demonize them for life, but it is definitely, there's absolutely no justification for doing that. As I said, I have been involved in, probably that was the most difficult state funeral, because it was 5 days for President Robinson, and we had to take over 300 persons, move them from Trinidad, send them to Tobago. And with all of that being done, mistakes will be made, people may forget things, but it does not justify and cannot give any justification for breaching order. When you have security, when you have railings, there's order. Anytime you try to jump over railings, you are trying to defy order. And when you defy order, that starts the whole system of a nation collapsing. And you can't expect to be a leader and be doing something like that and expect people to respect you.
Gary, all the best. Thanks for touching base this morning, giving some perspective, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk again very soon.
My pleasure. Take care.